as an architecture firm, they design and build stadiums, arenas, ballparks, convention centers, major sporting concert venues across the entire world. So there's offices in Singapore, Hong Kong, Switzerland, like everywhere. And within Populous, there's an events team. And so in the events team, there's about 30 of us who design major events. So we design what a stadium looks like or what a ballpark looks like for an event that is not typically hosted in that space. The vast majority of our team are architects because they design it. Like they design how a Colts locker room is now being used as a media workspace for 400 local media, or how the Super Bowl perimeter goes from just being around the stadium to then being bumped out. So they design that. So I'm a project manager. And so I make sure none of our architects go rogue in planning, or we stay within our budgetary restrictions. So a lot more of my responsibilities are putting out RFPs, requests for proposals from vendors who are going to be doing the build out, developing contracts, keeping everyone on schedule. I help the NCAA organize all of our monthly meetings for Final Four, or help the NFL design monthly meetings for the Pro Bowl, and really kind of just keep the project on track. So what the schedule looks like, who's moving into what space when, what are the operational needs, realizing, okay, we have 4 locker rooms for the Final Four. They all need to look identical. So I'll look at more of those details and make sure that across the space, our architects have covered everything that we need to deliver to the client, that we've stayed on our timeline for those deliverables, and laying out our work plan. So making sure that we're within our hours of work. So all of our hours are billable to a client. So I have a timesheet, which I didn't think I would ever be doing timesheets. And so making sure that we appropriately allocate hours that are needed for different elements of the project, and they get billed appropriately, and just forecasting those out year after year. So I work directly with 4 clients. My clients are the NCAA for for each of the Final Fours, the NFL for the Pro Bowl, Florida Citrus Sports for the Citrus Bowl and the kickoff game and their HBCU game, or the Florida Classic. And then we also have a contract with the government to run concerts on military bases. So right now, those are our events. We would have had Warrior Games, but Warrior Games was canceled. So we'll see how that ends up next year. But essentially, perfect example with the Final Four, and this starting a new job and then jumping into COVID, for a lot of people made it really quiet, but for us was actually really, really busy, because we were 14 days out from being on site for an event, and then the event gets canceled. And we essentially found out the same way that every other person in this country found out. And then our phones are ringing off the hook with vendors who are now having to cancel procurement of items. So for the 2020 Final Four, which would have been in Atlanta, we worked with a company called Peachtree Tents to acquire all of the tents that would go on top of the entrances into the stadium. So to cover all of the metal detectors. We went back and forth for about a month with a contract, and they were one of 9 vendors that we worked with. We had a vendor for tables, we had a vendor for chairs, any equipment that we needed that the stadium didn't have enough of. We acquired a vendor to work with. So we're 14 days out from the event. The event gets canceled. Currently, this Peachtree Tent company is the only company we have a signed contract with. Therefore, they're the only company that we are legally obliged to give a deposit to, because no other company had signed their contract. So we're in a really challenging position where lawyers are kind of going back and forth over 2 sentences in a contract on deposits and timeout from cancellation, which has never been done. Like what happened with the Final Four was unprecedented in terms of the event space. So it's a lot of, communicating with the vendors, and there was a lot of work going back and forth of contracts and all that. And if you don't have anything signed, you're not obligated to do anything. However, we are the leader in the sport industry. So there is a reputation from the company as well, in that we don't want to burn bridges with vendors in cities that we're most likely going to be working back in again. So getting on the phone and having the conversations of, okay, up until this point, how much square footage of fence did you buy? All right, we will cover 50% of the cost of this fence that you already bought, because you would not have bought it if the event wasn't going to be happening. So my third week in the job, I'm jumping into those conversations and mitigating those contracts and helping the vendor understand what the responsibilities are and where we're going forward, and what it looks like, and to make sure that the host committee, who is still in Atlanta as well, doesn't get a lot of backlash for what's happening. So we've had a lot of groups reach out to us to design plans for their reopening of the stadiums. So it's actually projects that I've been heavily involved with, of what that looks like. And it's going to change on all the front. So point of sale, I think we're going to see that all stadiums are going to be cashless. All arenas are going to be cashless. It's going to be a credit card system, or it's going to be an app ordering system. Same with tickets. Like I don't think you're going to see physical tickets in a lot of places anymore. It's all going to be on the phone. It's going to be a scan and go type of process. I think on the concessions end, people are going to be a lot more cognizant of what they touch. So the way that hot dogs are delivered are not going to be on a tray. They're going to be wrapped in a type of paper that person can hold that and eat. Or popcorn bowls are going to be designed with a spout on it, so you can pour popcorn directly in your mouth versus putting your hands in a bowl and bringing it out. There's going to be a lot less of the condiment stations. So you're going to have ketchup packets and mustard package. And so there's going to be changes within all of that. I think for security, if like the second you walk into the venue, you're probably going to have people wear masks and wear gloves, at least on the employee side, for people coming in. In terms of bags, I think stadiums are going to go to having no bags at all, because it's just more items and more product that's coming in that's been touched or been exposed to different places. I think now we're looking at also having kind of like a triage area. So when we look at a stadium, identifying a space that can be triaged. So if someone does come and present symptoms, then we're able to, pull them away from the crowd and medically handle that. And we're even looking at ways that people are entering a venue. So when someone has a ticket, do they have to come in between a specific time period and get to their seats? And you stagger out time periods. We're looking at separating a stadium into quadrants. So you're in your quadrant and you can only go to the concession stands in your quadrant. You can only get beer and alcohol from your quadrant, and you're only in your seat. So in the event that there is someone who does fall ill, we can quarantine that quadrant of folks rather than opening it up to this entire stadium. I think there's going to be a lot less interaction with teams. So a lot less autographs and meet and greets, and players are not probably going to be throwing their stuff up into the crowds. So a lot of that is really going to impact it. I know on the broadcasting side, they are exploring a lot of virtual games. So essentially you watch the game on your TV, and then next to the game, you have all your friends who have zoomed in to watch the game. So that front is going to change significantly over the next 3 to 5 years. And I think before COVID, it wasn't ever going to be a thought. I signed up for the D1 ticker emails. And there's another email that I think is relatively new called the Gist. And so that is a female-oriented email blast about current sporting events. and current sport news. And it's really, really great. For those who get the skim, that's another kind of like great email that gets sent out. They have hyperlinks within the article so you can get a snippet of it and then click on a hyperlink and read more. So D1 Ticker is pretty inclusive of collegiate news, and the gist is kind of all worldwide news with an emphasis on female. So those are like the two that I'm most interested in. The technology is ever changing. Right now, the NFL is moving exclusively to Microsoft Teams. So Microsoft Teams is definitely one of the tools that I've had to learn a lot more on and educate myself with. Smartsheet is another tool that is very, very heavily used. So the NFL, the NCAA, the Special Olympics, Florida Citrus Sports, University of Minnesota, there's a bunch of places that use this tool Smartsheet as a data saving, sharing kind of platform. And essentially it's a bunch of live spreadsheets that then interconnect, and you can go on and share files and attachments and have notifications. It's actually an incredible program. And so that's something that Populous uses. And because Populous uses it, we've had a lot of our clients kind of jump on board and use it as well. And that is one of the more secure programs. So from the privacy standpoint, I can see how many people have downloaded a file, and I can see how many people have logged into the spreadsheet. So for the NFL, for instance, they really like the tool because they can track, okay, who is downloading planning sets. And like for us on the architecture side, we release drawings. They're 45-page packets of how every space is being used, what doors are open, what the hours those doors are open, what the security looks like, how much staffing. And those are very confidential documents. So if those go out in the wrong hands, you now have someone who knows the weaknesses in the build to get in for a major event. So making sure that all of those are secure and private, those would be the two biggest ones. I'm like so grateful that I learned AutoCAD working for David Lucier, because we use that all the time. And I'm learning that Revit, REVITT, is the newer program that's being used for builds. And that's like very heavy on our end. But even working at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, the event managers who are planning a banquet dinner for 50 people, they're using those tools. So if you ever have the opportunity to do a tutorial or to do a 30-day trial and teach yourself just a little bit about any of that, is going to be really helpful, because there's not a lot of people that know it either coming out of school or before starting their job. Before I got my position with SAFE, I interviewed with ESPN College Game Day. And at the very end, before we're finishing up, she said something about Smartsheet. And I said, oh, I know Smartsheet. I'm actually a pretty avid user of Smartsheet, and I know it in and out. And she offered me the position. She said, the only reason I offered you the position is because you knew Smartsheet. Stadiums have, it's going to depend on the venue a lot, because sports are not going to just disappear. Like, we're going to get back to a point that we're having football games and we're having soccer games, and there's going to be fans in the stadium. Right now, the element is having spaces where people feel safe. And we think that if people feel safe to come in, that they're gonna show up, they're gonna be there. So a lot of stadiums have private event teams. So it's the proms, it's the 50-person banquets, it's the Budweiser corporate sponsor event or the Coca-Cola corporate sponsor event. So a lot of those will still go on, and that generates, it's not enough to carry the stadium, but it does generate a lot of revenue for the buildings. But I definitely think venues will have to be more creative on how they get themselves out there. I think venues that didn't have tours will start to have tours and bring people into more of those higher end spaces, the locker rooms that people would want to see and people would want to pay money for. But I think major events will still happen, maybe not in, the next 9 to 12 months. But after that, like it's just too big of a business, right? So if we do not have a college football season, the Power 5 conference schools will lose $4.1 billion. Like that's just Power Conference. And so if venues can't host major events, like you lose the industry, you lose major parts of the industry. So venues are going to find ways to get people back in for what they were designed for. And I think in the interim, a lot of places are trying to be creative on how they get people in the door and get to see what it looks like. One of the ideas that we've been talking about is taking 360 pictures within individual seats. And essentially it would be, you'd watch your game on your TV and you pay per your view. So your view of the game is whatever seat you might have gotten in that stadium. And we get all of the camera angles from that seat. So if you and your buddy typically would have gotten 4 seats together, all 4 of you are kind of looking from the same angle. And someone who might have paid more money would have a different view of the game. So still making fans feel like they would have been in that seat. And then I know like CBS is talking how they could project the people that are watching the game into the seats if it is a game that doesn't have fans. And they're pulling clips of like, for the Gators, like the third down cheers or the song that's played at the start of the third quarter, like thinking about all of those elements that create the game atmosphere and pumping that in to the background sound while you watch an event, even if it's not actually in the stadium. I think apps within the stadium are going to be more prevalent. So it's going to be a lot more ordering from your seat with specific pickup times for meals. That limits a lot of contact as well. So I think that might be the new norm where you don't even stand in line to order what you want. You just order it from your seat and then you go and pick it up at some point. Those would be like the biggest that come to mind. I know one of the biggest challenges we're looking at within the venue space are restrooms, because there's always lines for restrooms, especially the women's restroom, and it's close quarters and it's not the cleanest space in a venue. So what does that look like, and what technology can be used there to keep a fan engaged, but also to keep it safe, so that way a fan does come to a game because they feel like they're going to be safe in the venue. Every venue is different. And so, the Super Bowl is a rotating event. So yeah, like it's going to be in Tampa this year. And the problem is venues change. So you're not working in the same venue every year. And then even if you are working at, if we're in Tampa this year and we're in Tampa again in 10 years, at that point, the venue has changed again. So even you can use like right now for 2021 Final Four, we're out of Indy and we were in Indy for Final Four in 2015. So there are some things that we're able to overlap, but the stadium has done considerable renovations. And they've changed a lot of their seating and they've changed a lot of layouts. So the route or the space or the area that we were able to use in 2015 for one of our groups, we can no longer use it because it's not that anymore. It's not there anymore. So within the venue, that's one of it. The other part is outside of the venue. So Super Bowl major events have a perimeter. And so the perimeter is typically for an event at like Stephen C. O'Connell Center or at any stadium. It's typically at the stadium doors, right? So you walk into the glass doors or you walk through the metal detector that's right at the building. For major events, you have an extended perimeter. You have a bumped out perimeter, which typically includes street closures or lane restrictions or fencing that goes up in green space. When cities change, that has to change as well. So even though maybe everything inside of a venue is the same that it was 5 years ago, there might be planters that are now outside, which is where we used to put the fence, and now we can't put the fence there because there's planters or street lights, or the code is different. So the code has to have it a certain distance away. So there's really not much that changes in terms of the, you think planning meetings, like for Final Four, we start 18 months out. For Super Bowl, you start 24 months out. For an Olympics, you start 4.5 years out. So you use the template of planning over and over and over again. So we're asking the same questions every year in July in planning for that event, because that's always where we are in the planning process. So those would be most of the pieces that are pretty cookie cutter that we can just reapply and reuse. It's a hard one, because if you have an arena that seats 30,000 people, and then you still have 15,000 people that are bumping around, right? And so if you kind of like, I'm pulling out like my high school science brain, if you think about like molecules, if you have 15,000 people that are all bouncing around and they have access to this every space in the stadium, you're having a lot of transfer and a lot of those contact that like the CDC talk about. However, if you allow all 30,000 people into the venue, but you limit each person to have their little pie, and they're only bumping around with the 2,000 people in their little pie, in the event that someone were to get sick in that pie, they're not getting everyone else sick around them. So having a full stadium and a chunk and having it chunked out actually ends up being safer than having 50% occupancy and having everyone have free reign into the building. So, but not every building is designed where you can have that, right? So like the access to the suite spaces might interact with other folks. So that's kind of where like our team from the design angle is coming in of like, what does that access look like? What does that entry look like? And then there's some people that go to sporting events because they like the whole experience. So they want to walk around the entire concourse. They want to see all the decor and all of the sponsorships. They want to, they don't want to just go and sit in their suite and watch the game. And so how do you still get an experience for those fans and those groups? Like if someone has a 2-year-old, the likelihood that they're going to come and sit in their seat the entire time, watch the game and leave is highly unlikely. So what elements can you create in this little pie of access that makes them feel like they're not missing out on all the other pieces of the pie in the venue around them? And that's what's really, really challenging, because now you're competing with square footage. So the long answer to that is I don't really know where it's going to go. Outdoor venues definitely have an advantage rather than indoor venues because of air circulation. And that might be that, a baseball field opens up and has full occupancy, but all their suites are closed. And then what does that look like from ticket sales, from revenue? Those are your higher paying tickets. But what ultimately, what a lot of this is going to come down to is actually the players union and not the venues and people's desires to come back. So it depends, if a players union says we want 50% occupancy, then the venues are going to figure it out of what it looks like with only 50% occupancy and what that spacing looks like, and where people are seated. And maybe that's people are sat together every other section. I honestly believe that liquor sales will go down, and it will be the individual wine bottles, it will be individual beer cans, or it will be pre-made enclosed drinks because of contamination and because of germs and all that, and you can set it out. I think it's going to be kind of like when you order to go from a Starbucks or from a restaurant, and you go and you have your name on your order and you pick it up in the container and you bring it back down to your seat. I think if that's the direction that stadiums are going to go with ordering from your seat, that's how they're going to do it. So that way you don't have someone kind of running back and forth. And the other part of that is the staffing as well. So you have, say, 60,000 fans in a venue. Now you have 750 security guards, and then you have another 350 concession employees, and then you have your guest services, right? So you have all of these people in an arena or a stadium as well who are working. And I think if you take some of those out, it's just less contact that you have, and less people that are susceptible to getting sick. I think it's different by client and different by demographic. So, you know, the folks going to a football game is very different than the folks going to a college basketball game. So being aware of that. So, you know, for a college basketball game or college football game, for instance, it's the crowd noise, it's the cheers, it's the chants, it's the camaraderie, it's the competition. That is really like what energizes, you know, most of the time, like you don't watch the college football game, but you're participating on all the cheers and you're drinking with your friends. And then, so that would be like for the college demographic. And then, you know, more of the alumni demographic, understanding what they typically look like. And so I know some groups have been pulling postseason surveys from last year of what elements were really key, and analyzing that of how they can incorporate it into either the virtual setting or adapting it to fit, you know, the in-person. So, you know, for instance, like CBS, if they're going virtual, or ESPN, if they're going virtual, they're going to try to pull like the home team's cheers and the chants, and maybe have that geographically focused. So that way the noises that you're hearing from Auburn are a little different than the noises you're hearing, you know, Alabama, or you pick what your team is. And as you watch the game, you feel like you're part of those cheers, those chants, those, you know, that experience. And then it's going to be a little bit of it's definitely going to be an adjustment for fans, and it's going to be a little bit of a sacrifice as well. Because do you want to go to an event to watch the game and to cheer on for your team, and maybe miss out on some of the other things that you are used to, and not have like the huge crazy fan club with like the cheeseheads for the Green Bay Packers? Like, if that's the direction, you know, that it goes in, where do your priorities lie? And is it more of being there and supporting your team and watching a game, or is it the tailgating and the partying and all that? And I think we'll kind of see, based on attendance, what those types of people are, and how to adjust the experience, and whether it's, you know, designated tailgating areas and you all walk in as a group and you guys are all sitting in the same part of the stadium together, whether you're a Green Bay fan or you're a Bears fan. Like, it's going to be interesting to see where that goes, to make sure that people feel safe. I don't think masks are going to be required. I think we're going away from masks being required. So that's one less thing that people will kind of have to, quote, sacrifice in order to go to a sporting event. But I think it's just going to be what people's priorities are. And I think the financial element is going to change a lot too. So I think ticket prices are going to change significantly. And I think being able to watch a game at home for free is also going to change significantly. I will be at Populous for a long time. Like right now, it's been my dream to run major events. I mean, I have the opportunity to, you know, run, organize, plan, develop, lead, and then work 6 military concerts, a Super Bowl, Final Four year after year, Pro Bowl year after year. We put in bids for Warrior Games. When Olympics comes to the States, we'll have an involvement with Olympics. When World Cup comes to the States, we'll have an involvement with World Cup. We put in things for the Pan American Games, and we work heavily with Special Olympics. So for me, it is like the holy grail of every event that I could have ever dreamed of that I would want to be part of. So I will be with this company for a while. However, in my interview process, I did ask, like, where's my growth from here? My boss wants to retire in 10 years. So he is priming me to kind of take over the clients. So I think, you know, in the next 3 to 5 years, I would be the lead project manager for the final four. And soon after that, the lead project manager for Populous. So I'm just working my way up within this element of the industry. And part of that is a lot of continuing education as well. So learning more about, you know, like being a part of IAVM and how venues are changing and how they're being redesigned and how they're being developed. And I'm going to go to the Project Management Institute and get my certification to be a project manager. And all of that for me is growth, and for my company is growth as well. And it's, this industry is ever changing, and major events is ever changing, and they're always redesigning and redeveloping and revamping and how we can be better and how we can be bolder. And, you know, the Atlanta Final Four was supposed to be the highest attended event. So how all of this is going to change, and as more stadiums get torn down and then rebuilt to fit more people, the event is always going to be challenging, even if it's the same event and if it's the same client. So I have bounced around the country, and I've worked 7 different jobs, and I landed where I wanted to land. The opportunities that I've had over the course of my career is pretty unique and pretty different. And it has solely been on relationships. So I think that's one of the key parts. So at the University of Minnesota, it was a 1-year internship. So I'm looking for a position at the end of my 1-year internship. And then I got brought on by the local organizing committee, and that was a 1-year contracted position. So they always had like a life term to them. So in those, I knew I'd be looking for something else. And really, like outside of graduating from college, the first time I really applied for jobs was after working for the LOC in Minneapolis, which is when I landed with SAFE. And I think learning, like going back, I didn't ask the right questions in the interview that I probably should have of what safe management was like. And it ended up being a culture that I was not going to grow. Like I was going to wilt and die in that culture. And not jabbing the company or the workplace, but it wasn't the fit for me. And I knew like deep down it wasn't the fit for me. But I was like, you know what, there's still a lot of opportunity for growth here. And there's still a lot of things that I can learn. Like Mercedes-Benz Stadium hosts concerts, hosts sporting events, hosts private events, soccer. I mean, they really had a lot of different types of experiences that I could have gotten to be competitive. But it didn't feel right. So when Populous came and recruited me for this position, for me, it was a no-brainer. Like I wasn't happy where I was at, and I knew this would be the type of soil and environment where I could thrive in and where I could really grow. So it's, for me personally, it is about the people. It is not about the company. If you are in a place with phenomenal people that you thoroughly enjoy working with, doing work that you enjoy, you're going to be fine, even if it's not a name brand company or it's not, you know, a organization that a lot of people know. If you're happy there, that's what matters. And if you're happy, you're going to thrive. But there is, you know, and you have conversations in your annual reviews and with your supervisors of where is that growth. So for instance, the NCAA, great organization, but the director of men's basketball operations has been there for 20 years. So that's the type of position, like if you are under him, you're never going to get that role. He's not leaving. So you either take the experience that you've gotten working for the NCAA and you leave, or you accept the fact that like you're not going to continue, there's no opportunity for growth to keep moving up. And so you have to understand what that environment and that culture is like. And so for here, you know, my boss was clear in the interview, like I'm retiring 10 years. Like if you stay, you're working your way up in here. So it's understanding like what the culture is and what the environment is, and how quickly you can move up and how fast you can move around. For instance, if you were to work for ESPN, you move up every 3 years. Like no matter what, you get progressed through the company every 3 years, and that's simply part of their culture. Be uncomfortable or be comfortable in the uncomfortable. I think you're never too high up to do a menial task. So, you know, working with Populous, like we run major events, but I'm moving bike rack. And if I have to clean a toilet, I'm cleaning a toilet. And like, you're never going to be above that. And I learned that working at the O'Connell Center, to be honest. Like there's no task too small. Building relationships is definitely huge. I think having confidence in yourself and having your ability, confidence is contagious. And there's so many people that you sit in a meeting with, and they're like, well, I don't know about this, or I don't know about that. And you don't like believe in their answers anymore. They're not selling you on what they want. And if you can, you know, if you can sell bullshit to a farmer, excuse my French, then you're going to be respected and people are going to listen to what you have to say. And you're going to do really, really well when you have confidence in who you are and what you have to deliver, and what it is. And I think also you're never going to stop learning, never stop growing. I'm humbled all the time by things that I thought that I knew that I didn't know, or things that I thought about and I actually didn't think about. So not being too into yourself and into your abilities that you miss out on learning things. And like the industry, no matter what part of the event or sport industry you're in, it is always changing. It is always, always changing. So what worked last year is not going to work next year. And just being able to be adaptive.